One of the challenges you'll face as an assistant leader or eventually leader on a trip is ensuring that the clients do as they've been asked, particularly in regards to safety. You can lay out some expectations of social rules during the briefing at the start of the day, as well as the safety rules. And so you can talk about what we consider socially acceptable on this trip, the types of comments that are welcome or unwelcome, and as well as the situations that they're going to come across where it's going to be a safety issue and you need them to do exactly as they are asked. It might be worth pointing out some things that are optional and lay out their options, and things that are not optional. So they're clear that it's not all about the rules, but there are situations where they will have choices, and there's situations where there is no choice if you wish to participate in this activity. Whilst we're discussing safety, it's worth considering who's going to hold the safety information on site. Okay, you're going to need a primary contact person who's not there with you. That would be the person you'd call if they needed to raise the alarm. If for some reason you weren't able to get reception yourself or something, that they'll be the person you'll call when you're in trouble, and they'll also be the person you call once you get back. You're going to let them know you're leaving, the time that you're leaving, and you'll call them and say, we're leaving. And then they can assume that everything's going fine if there's no contact, and when you get back you should call them and say, hey, we're all back safe, everyone's accounted for, everything went well. So you'd need a primary contact person. You may also need an emergency contact person, that if you're calling them, you're basically in trouble and you're going to need them to spring into action. So you're going to need these numbers on the ground with you, either in your phone or written down on a piece of paper. So this is all part of having an appropriate emergency response plan, which we cover in a different part of the course. Something you are going to need to do in the briefing is, even if you put it in an email, even if you put it in a flyer, even if you've had a conversation beforehand, is on the day, check the suitability of their clothing. It is not uncommon to give a briefing to a range of people and have them standing in front of you, and perhaps as the assistant, your team leader may be giving the briefing, but he will ask you to be looking at their equipment that they're wearing as he gives the briefing, and ask you to try and judge whether you feel the equipment is appropriate or not. It is normal situation for companies or schools that you're working for to have some hire equipment in reserve if the people participating in the activity have not come with the suitable equipment, even if you told them what the suitable equipment is. So I often find when I'm giving a briefing, I'm not only thinking about the day and telling them what to expect, I'm also looking at the clothes they're wearing, asking them questions along the lines of, how's everyone going? It's really great to see you. Is everyone really looking forward to the bushwalk that we're going to be doing today? And whilst I'm doing that, I'm looking for their reactions, and I'll be asking, okay, does everyone think they've got the right equipment, or do some people think they need to get some additional equipment because they haven't been able to find what they need? It's really important not to make them feel silly or stupid, or make that situation stand out or somehow feel ashamed of not being in the right equipment. So you can make it very much an opening question, saying, if you feel some of the equipment you brought may not be okay, you can check with Steve, our assistant over here, and he will just sort of sit down with you and discuss whether what you've brought is appropriate or is not, if you're unsure. So then they're free after the briefing to go and do that and have that conversation. Sometimes to you, it will be grossly apparent that they've brought the wrong stuff, even if they think it's okay. Sometimes that's an awkward situation that they're going to go, no, this is fine. And you're going to have to go, look, I'm afraid for the requirements of this trip, and it's a company requirement, that you can't wear thongs on this 3-day bushwalk. They're simply not appropriate when you're carrying a 20 kilo pack across this mountain range. And I've had people say, no, these are fine. And I've had to go, look, I'm sorry, but they're not going to be fine for this trip on our circumstances. It may well be fine for you on your own private trip, and you're more than welcome to go and have that private trip, but we can't allow it with this company in this circumstance. So you can put it onto policy rather than a personal judgment about whether they're able to or not. But what you can do is sort of shift it away from their ability to company policy. And then they may be more understanding about changing that situation, because then you can also put it on the situation of, I can't allow you because of our policy, I'm not going to allow you because I don't think you can make it in a pair of thongs. Now, they may well make it in a pair of thongs uninjured, but that's not the point. You're going to have a risk assessment and emergency procedures that say they're going to be wearing appropriate equipment, and it's going to be your company that determines what equipment is appropriate. You want to let them know that in advance. If they still rock up in thongs, you're going to need to let them know that before they start. I had an interesting situation once, which wasn't a commercially run trip. It was just a privately run trip. It was expected to be a snow trip, and the snow was worse than we expected, and that was okay because most of us had the right equipment, except one person, where they got out of the car and I said, "Oh, you're going to change your shoes and get into your walking boots?" And he was like, no, this is what I'm wearing. And I went, oh. I kind of looked at the conditions, I looked at his feet and went, well, he'll survive. I don't think it's life and death, but he's definitely going to get cold feet. And I did tell him that. And as he did, 2 days later, where we sort of ended up having a chat, every tip of his toes, only skin deep, had gone black because he'd got frost nip during the trip, that his feet had got that cold, that it's not frostbite, but at least the first few layers of skin had died, his feet had got that cold. It didn't kill him. I think he learned a valuable lesson, and it was not necessarily a situation where we were going to pull the trip because he was going to get cold feet, and he was adamant that his feet would be fine, and they were. He just lost some skin off the end, but it was a bit of a shock to him when every toe, the top of every toe, was black with all the skin dead, because he hadn't really listened to the advice that was given to him by people who are more experienced. Most companies will have spare equipment on site, and it may be given to you as a role that you are to fit that equipment to each person before you leave. Often, if they've brought the wrong equipment, you'll be carrying what we call equipment that's going to be a game stopper, that if they've bought it, that they actually can't go unless they have the right equipment. You should have that stuff as hire equipment or as rental equipment, that therefore they can rent that off you, and therefore they're still able to go. Okay, because if you didn't have that, you'd actually have to tell them they can't go. So it's important to have some of those game stopper equipments in stock. Now, most people don't like hire equipment. Let's face it, it's often it's durable, but it's not necessarily comfortable. And sometimes that's deliberate with certain companies because they want you to buy the right equipment, sometimes off them, before you leave. So hire equipment is an option for them. Or you could actually buy your own equipment from our store, which is just across the road, and you'll be comfortable. Or you can have the hire equipment, which is fine, but it's not going to be quite as comfortable as having your own equipment. So there's various cells that some companies have put in there to make extra money, and that might be something you're asked to do. You might even be asked to go over and fit them with their own equipment, which they may want to purchase rather than hiring rental equipment. Something that is worth cross-checking, not only their equipment, is their food. We mentioned that earlier. You're going to need to at least touch base with them, and if you get a chance to even ask everyone to get their food out, because we need to make sure you've got the appropriate food for the trip. It's no point doing that the first night out of the trip when everyone pulls their food out and there's one person just eating a muesli bar, because they thought that's going to be one muesli bar a day, it's going to be adequate for them. And you, as an assistant leader, may be the person who's asked to carry, like I used to carry, 4 or 5 packets of 2-minute noodles, just in case you come across someone who's gone, yeah, no, I just brought muesli bars, I felt that would be fine. And you tend to know better that you burn a lot more energy on a trip like this, and that person's not prepared for that amount of energy to be burnt. And I guess obviously 2-minute noodles is not an appropriate food in every situation. However, it is enough to stop them being hungry and it is enough to give them energy. It's not enough to give you proper vitamins. It's not a well-balanced meal, but it's better than being hungry and ending up being cold because you can't have anything warm or you haven't had enough food. One of the things you may be required to do whilst on the activity is helping clients with their technique or any issues or needs they may have. It's important that you do use some expected social skills in sort of coaching them or guiding them in those activities. You always want to be encouraging and positive in how they're going, but you can also help them reframe the situation when maybe they've taken on something that's too difficult for them. Something that's important to do in this situation, they might be climbing a cliff and they might say something along the lines of, "I keep slipping." If that's the situation, you're going to want to ask a clarifying question. You're going, which part is slipping on you? Or you could make it a statement and go, your shoes keep slipping? And they'll be like, no, my hands keep slipping. So you've asked a question and you've got clarification about their problem or their need. That's important because there's no point you offering them chalk for their hands if it was their shoes that are slipping because they've got the wrong size of shoe. So with rock climbing, you need a tight fitting shoe that when you're trying to smear on a cliff or actually use it, your foot doesn't spin inside the shoe. They may not have the language or the understanding to be that clear about whether it's their hands that are slipping or that their shoes are slipping. And you have got the knowledge and the ability to quickly solve this problem for them by just offering them chalk to use for their hands, or suggesting that maybe they try another pair of shoes because you've brought some larger ones and some smaller ones to the cliff just in case some people found theirs didn't fit. It's also really important when you're trying to assess a client's needs or to help them out that you might make your statements really clear and one by one. Don't flood them with information. Wait for their response or their body language to get back to you so you can sort of judge whether they're understanding or not. Are they nodding or are they looking confused? Something you want to avoid is a lot of technical jargon or acronyms that they're not going to know. You want to try and keep your language simple. You may want to show off your vast knowledge about rafting or rivers or this or that, or your understanding of equipment, or you know all the acronyms for certain fancy terms. Leave that for your personal time or something else. Okay? A client needs to know that you understand, and they need to understand what you're talking about. They don't care how much you know. It's actually more about them enjoying their trip because that's what they've paid for, and you're there to help them, not show off. So try not to use acronyms, or if you have to, you can, rather than saying it's an ATC, say it's a belay device. Or rather than sort of calling the equipment by its brand, make sure you call it by the thing, say the life jacket, rather than the Stormy Seas. Or call it a paddle or a kayak rather than naming it by its name that often only paddlers or kayaks would actually know. So say the red kayak rather than the red mamba. Or the blue RP7. Don't use those terms. Just say the blue kayak that's kind of flat on top would be a more appropriate language for you to use rather than using paddler's jargon or climber's jargon or bushwalking jargon. Okay? Part of your role might be to educate your clients as you go along. Talk to them, if you're going bushwalking, why you would wear gaiters and what you wear gaiters for. That's certainly appropriate because you're educating them in the activity. You need to learn by observing the other leaders around you what level of use in that area is appropriate. Okay, what's considered showing off versus what's considered being helpful. It's equally important during the debrief to remain positive, that you encourage them about how they went, what they did well. If people have not done well, they usually know it. You don't need to tell them what they didn't do well. But it is a situation where you can get them to self-reflect. Ask them about what they found challenging. Ask them about what they would personally like to improve on. Don't tell them what they need to improve on. There's just a good opportunity there for them to go, next time I would like to. And you go, great, next time you should try that. In fact, we're running a trip in another 2 months. that it would be great for you to try and work on that thing that you've said you wanted to actually improve on. So it's actually a good selling point as well as an encouragement point. If you tell them how bad they are at an activity, they're not going to want to try again, and they're not going to want to come back. So it's really important to be positive, to be encouraging, and to support their learning and encourage them to come back again and try those things, those challenges they had, to overcome them, and to celebrate if they have overcome some of those challenges.